Oh, Canada, often dubbed America's presumptive 51st state, has been making headlines for a whole host of reasons. A prime minister's resignation, sky-high housing prices, and a tricky relationship with its only neighbor. All these factors have left its economy not as strong as it was just 10 years ago. Sure, Canada remains a wealthy, advanced nation, and things would have to get a lot worse for that to change. But economists are watching every move because the challenges here might soon show up in other parts of the world. Canada seems to be leading the way when it comes to issues like risky real estate deals, heavy reliance on natural resources, an aging population, and sluggish productivity. Mix in some questionable immigration policies, and these problems become more pronounced here than in most other developed countries. Before we get too gloomy, remember that Canada offers a fascinating look at how economic decisions really play out. What exactly are its current challenges? Can they be fixed? And what might happen if they aren't? Back in 2008, like many major nations, Canada's economy took a sharp dive after the global financial crisis. But because its housing and financial markets weren't as overheated as those in the USA, and thanks to strong resource exports to China, it didn't suffer as badly as America or Europe. Canada not only bounced back from the crisis, but even enjoyed a brief resurgence over the next 2 years. However, while countries like the USA experienced booming growth, Canada's recovery was less smooth, leading to a long period of stagnation. After the oil market crash in 2014, a long list of vulnerabilities became clear. Among them, the housing market. Beyond the usual zoning laws and regulations, Canada made some key mistakes that have made housing unbelievably unaffordable compared to other Western countries. Low interest rates and the view of real estate as a safe investment played big roles here. After all, lowering interest rates is a common way to boost consumer confidence and keep spending alive after a crisis. For one thing, Canada's housing market didn't crash as hard as the USA's because lending and real estate investments were more tightly controlled. That sounds positive, but when interest rates dropped, just like in other nations, it only boosted a market that had barely felt the 2008 correction. Over time, this created the belief that housing is both a secure investment and simply a place to live. As more people started using homes to build wealth, rising prices became seen as a good thing, even a political win. Imagine if a dishwasher doubled in price every 5 years. Most would see that as a failure. But when houses do the same, many Canadians cheer because it means their wealth grows. This mindset has turned homeownership into a national obsession. Canada could have fixed these problems early on by raising interest rates, tightening lending rules, and cutting tax breaks for homeownership. But since so many people own homes, changing the system has been politically tricky, especially when housing debt now exceeds the nation's total GDP. No one wants to be the one to end the party. Yet, this isn't sustainable. Home prices have surged over 300% in the past 2 decades, while average incomes have only risen about 100%. As a result, the party is bound to end. More people are now living with their parents or relying on family help to buy a home, which only deepens the wealth gap between generations. And this challenge is further complicated by rising migration issues. At its core, the housing market is just a symptom of a deeper problem: slow productivity and a loss of skilled workers. Even though Canada and the USA share many cultural similarities, from entertainment to law, higher education, and technology, Canadians produce less than Americans. Even when you adjust for work hours, Americans work about 6% longer. They're still roughly 30% more productive. Looking at each industry, Canada continues to lag behind. It's not about lazy workers or bad conditions. It all comes down to investment. The USA pours far more money into making its workers productive. We touched on this before. To grow, a country needs 3 things: land, labor, and capital. Labor improves with a younger, healthier population and better education. Land becomes more valuable with rich natural resources and smart locations like near water. Capital, including machinery and infrastructure, helps produce even more goods. Improving one of these areas helps the others. For example, modernizing farming with better fertilizers, improved seeds, and mechanized equipment boosts efficiency, reduces waste, and increases crop yields, while cutting down on heavy labor. This is clear in farming and manufacturing, but even technology depends on expensive infrastructure that Canada just can't match. The USA invests far more, which means they have better tools, more innovation, and larger, more dominant companies. The truth is, Canada has been slipping in these areas for about 40 years. Natural resources once made up 26% of the economy, but now account for less than 12%. Agriculture has dropped to around 5% and is heading toward 1%, while manufacturing now contributes only about half of what it did in the 1980s. These numbers show that something else is taking over. Canada's economy is now in a retirement phase, marked by an aging population focused on healthcare and a wave of wealthy individuals shifting their money into real estate. That's why Canada's lost decade, or even lost decades, has largely flown under the radar. Despite dramatic headlines about a housing crisis, many Canadians built a strong nest egg during the boom, especially after the pandemic. Lower delinquencies and a limited supply of homes kept prices high, but this has created huge challenges. And then there's Canada's quiet rivalry with the loud, dynamic USA. With an aging population and a cautious mindset, today's Canada is very different from the country it was just 10 years ago. Industries have become more consolidated and less innovative. Investors are putting their money into real estate rather than businesses that add sustainable value. For investors to choose Canada over the more business-friendly, financially robust, and innovative USA, there'd have to be a compelling reason. And so far, that reason is missing. This lack of investment means fewer new businesses, fewer tools for workers, and lower wages. It would be manageable if Canada weren't so expensive because of all the money pouring into real estate. Worse still, many talented Canadians are moving to the USA for better career opportunities and world-class colleges, and they often don't come back. In fact, the latest census shows a 70% increase in people leaving over the past 10 years. To counter this brain drain, the government has tried several policies. In the past, natural resources helped cushion the economic blow, but that support is unstable and tied to global market shifts. Canada also opened its doors to two types of migrants. First, wealthy immigrants bring benefits like tax revenue and capital for diversification, and they can even improve international ties. However, while they inject needed cash, they can also stir up problems, like driving up luxury home prices, making it even harder for long-time residents to afford a home. Then there are migrants who come looking for a better life. They might not bring as much capital, but they fill jobs that others aren't willing to take. Before the pandemic, Canada even used a two-step migration model that allowed temporary students and workers to come in. This helped fill essential roles for an aging population, even as young talent left for the USA. On a less political note, for Canadians who have built up wealth, having a steady supply of workers can really boost quality of life, whether that's having support staff or someone to deliver your favorite meal. Canada once had a strict policy. If unemployment went over 6%, they stopped accepting temporary foreign workers, except in remote areas, to protect local jobs. That rule also aimed to boost wages and prevent big companies from exploiting workers. But now, to counter economic stagnation, those rules have been relaxed. While this has helped keep the economy running, it has also pushed housing prices even higher and made the job market more competitive, fueling brain drain as talented workers head to the USA for better pay and lower levy. Things may get even tougher when immigration numbers eventually have to be cut, like suddenly stopping a favorite habit. In the long run, it might be the right move, but in the short term, it could hit hard. And if that wasn't enough, the once quiet rivalry between Canada and the USA is now getting louder. Whether the talk of Canada becoming the 51st state is just for show or not, the constant threat of tariffs is shaking up Canada's already fragile industries. Beyond the gloom, there are ways for Canada to bounce back. It all depends on what they choose to prioritize. For instance, Canada's infrastructure gap is a massive problem, costing over $200 billion. Redirecting government spending to lasting improvements could boost long-term jobs and help develop skilled labor. Another challenge is Canada's government structure. Cities bear most of the financial burden, making these issues seem like someone else's problem, even as rapid population growth creates serious strain. And then there's the climate. Harsh weather wears down infrastructure faster than in milder, drier places. In the far north, transporting materials is especially costly. While it's unlikely that Canada will outdo the USA when it comes to incentives, it can still slow the brain drain by investing in automation and better industrial tools, and by helping incomes stretch further, especially when it comes to housing. To their credit, Canada has started taking these steps, but they need to move much faster to catch up. The problem is, Canada has very few resources left. With soaring immigration, housing debt higher than its GDP, widening wealth gaps, massive brain drain, and a temporary leadership gap, there isn't much room for error. Canada's hesitation to act early means that digging itself out of this hole will be twice as hard. In many ways, today's Canada mirrors Spain from 20 years ago, a story that didn't end well. No one can predict the future, but check out the video on your screen to see if you can spot the similarities for yourself. Thanks for watching, mate. Bye.